على أشرف المرسلين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. So today it's our monthly halaqa. As you know, it's always the second Sunday of each month. And with us today we have Sheikh Musa, inshallah. We are blessed to have him. Everyone knows Sheikh Musa. Okay. And it's the topic is my mom, my heaven. Okay. But just because it does coincide with the Mother's Day. Celebrated every year. So, but it's in a Islamic way to look at it. Okay. So we are gonna have the lecture, inshallah. Then we are gonna have a Kahoot with like 10 questions. Which is about mothers. And then it's gonna be dinner. Then Salat al-Maghrib, led by Sheikh Musa as well, inshallah. So without any ado, we have Sheikh Musa who's gonna start this lecture.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa azwajihi, wa dhurriyyatihi wa ashabihi wa man wala, wa ba'du, alhamdulillah, thumma alhamdulillah. يقول الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وقضى ربك ألا تعبدوا إلا إياه وبالوالدين إحسانا. After praising Allah and sending peace and blessings on our Prophet and on his family, on his companions, on all those who follow him with excellence in the last day, Allah mentions in the Quran what's known as Ayatul Walidain, the verse of the parents. And it's where he states that indeed your Lord has ordained and prescribed that you worship no other God besides him and that you honor your parents. So this initial verse, when you look at it, it mentions two very important things in our faith. The first of which is Tawheed. The first of which is the belief in the oneness of Allah. The first, maybe closer to that's better, right? The first is belief in the oneness of Allah. We all know how important that is. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, along with that, mentions the importance of honoring our parents. So the fact that they're mentioned together, it's showing you the value of this command.
Can I just talk a little bit? Can you use this mic? Let's see. Assalamualaikum. Yeah.
Sure.
Try this. Yeah.
So it shows something which is very important, which is to honor our parents. And after ensuring that you worship one God, which is the purpose of the human being, Allah mentions, make sure you honor your parents. Now, the human being, sometimes we think we know everything. Sometimes we think we can just figure things out for ourselves. And as we get older, as we get more intelligent, we don't like people to tell us how to live our life. We don't like people to tell us how to be. We don't like people to tell us what's right or wrong because we feel like we already know it ourselves. We know how to be a good person. We know how to be a righteous individual. We know what is morality and what's immorality. We don't need someone to tell us those things. As a Muslim, however, we always stay humble because over every person who knows, وَفَوْقَ كُلِّ ذِي عِلْمٍ عَلِيمٍ, over every person who knows something, there's the all-knowing who knows everything. And everything in our life is actually a small representation of how things will be in the afterlife. There's a lesson in everything around us. So if you look in the room around us, we have a lot of youngsters. We have some people who are maybe teenagers. We have some who are maybe young adults starting their families. We have others who are older than that and have, mashallah, Children graduating from high school. It's an exciting time now. Is anyone here graduating from high school? MashaAllah. Congratulations to you. Allah accept you and bless you. And then you have other people who, mashallah, are getting grays in their hair. You have grandparents here, and we may even have some great-grandparents. Allah knows best. But everyone think back to when you were a child. And everyone think about the children who are here. When the child tries to act like they know everything, it's humorous to us. It's humorous to us. When your 4-year-old son or your 4-year-old daughter or your 4-year-old little brother or your 4-year-old little sister acts like they know everything. And we chuckle to ourselves like, mashallah, they're so cute, because they think they know everything and they want to be like an adult. The thing is that we go through childhood so we don't forget how silly we sound sometimes when we become adults. Because it actually happens to us as adults also. We get older, we become intelligent, and then we think we know better. And we think we have all the answers to life. And we forget that we seem very silly, actually, in comparison to Allah, in comparison to the teachings of our Prophet ﷺ. The whole experience of childhood was so that when we become adults, we don't forget that we don't know everything. Just like the child, otherwise we're going to seem very silly as adults. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created the deen for us so that He can explain what is right and what is wrong. He can explain to us the things which we can't figure out for ourselves. But if we insist that we have all the answers for ourselves, it's almost as if we're trying to create our own stairway to heaven. I have this idea of like making this a stairway to heaven, to Jannah. We can't make a stairway to heaven. It's too high. It's much too difficult. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from His mercy, what He actually does is He lowers the stairway from heaven. This is Allah's mercy. We can't build it ourselves. We can't even make it to Mars. As much as we've tried, we haven't been there yet. Maybe one day Elon Musk will make some colony out there and some people will decide to go move there. I'm not going to be one of them. But we haven't even gotten to like the nearest planet to us yet. There's no way we could make a stairway to heaven. Allah's mercy is, again, He sends down this stairway to us. And what is the sending down of this? Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. We just went through Ramadan. Allah sent down the Quran. He sent down the Quran on the night of power. He sent it down. And that really is our stairway to heaven. The Quran, the teachings of the Quran, the teachings of Islam, the teachings of our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. He tells us how to make it to paradise because we can't figure it out for ourselves. Anyone who thinks they can figure it out for themselves, they're going to look silly like a 4-year-old who thinks they know everything. And as we get older, a lot of teenagers here, high school students, university students, we become more intellectual, mashallah. We get challenged with our beliefs. People try to challenge our faith and they start asking all types of questions. And it seems, mashallah, very intellectual. There's nothing more intellectual than our faith and our deen. And there was no one more intelligent than our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. This is a very important part of our faith. And we have to, do our best to stay connected to learning our faith. Because if you stay connected to learning your faith, if you stay connected to learning your deen, you will see for yourself how amazing it is. The problem is sometimes we just rely on what we learned as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old. Alhamdulillah, there's nice, probably Sunday school is being established here at CVIC, and there's good programs for teaching our youth. But that is not the end-all be-all, right? You don't come, for example, to the masjid to become a PhD. You don't come here to get all of your knowledge. You come here to get some of your values, but you're not coming here to get a college degree. It would be silly if you expected yourself to graduate from high school and get a college degree at the masjid here. This is not the place for that. You'll get basic knowledge and basic values, but like everything else, if you want to excel, then you have to be willing to learn as you get older also. So, this deen of ours, the teachings of the Quran, the teachings of Allah, the teachings of our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, this is Allah actually sending down a stairway from Jannah, a stairway from paradise, so that He is now offering us to now climb and make our way there. From among the most important things, as I said, I recited this verse in the very beginning, is that your Lord has ordained to worship none other than Him, meaning one God, وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا, and to honor your parents. This is one of the most effective ways that we can now make it to paradise. That if you have a mother and a father, we should treat them nice. We should love them, we should honor them, we should respect them. And perhaps as you get older, you remember how they all took, some of us who are older, we remember how our parents took care of us. And at some point they get weaker. At some point they will get weaker, and they will actually not even be able to take care of themselves. And that's where we come in, where we remember the mercy that they showed to us, and we take care of them also. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِندَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُل لَّهُمَا أُفٍّ وَلَا تَنْهَرْهُمَا وَقُل لَّهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. At some point, you may reach a part and a time in your life when one of them or both of them are old, and they're no longer able to take care of themselves. So don't ever show any type of dissatisfaction to them. Don't even say oof to them. What does oof mean? Oof is not even an actual word. If you look up the definition of oof, you won't find it because it doesn't exist. Oof is just an expression of not being happy. So we're not even supposed to say even a sound which would be disrespectful to our mother and father. This is something which is very important. That as much as possible, sometimes our mother or our father may tell us something that we don't want to do. They may tell us something that we're not really happy with. I might be busy doing something else. But be patient. Show respect to them. And if it's something that you really can't do at the moment, or you're really, really actually busy, or you're really, really tired at that moment, what should you do? Tell them very politely. Mom, dad, mommy, daddy, abba, ummi, whatever we call our parents. Is it okay if I do it a little bit later? I'm a little bit tired right now. Or I was just finishing up my homework. Can I do it after my homework? Then we do it very politely, and we ask very politely. It doesn't have to be with attitude, and it doesn't have to be with oof. Sometimes as parents, and I have 4 sons of my own, mashallah, sometimes even the face that you make can make your parents feel sad. Like, why is my son or my daughter making this face to me? Like someone's pulling out their teeth. So always show respect to our parents and always show love, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who blessed us with them. So at some point they may become older in our life, and if you do happen to reach that point, then we're supposed to not even say oof to them. Continue taking care of them. Now I want to backtrack also a little bit too. Sister Fatima, may Allah bless her and reward her, and all of the community members here who are putting this program together. We do know that it happens to be Mother's Day, and sometimes people wonder, like, what is this? I thought we're Muslim. I thought we don't celebrate, Mother's Day, or every day is Mother's Day, isn't it? Every day is Mother's Day? Every day is absolutely Mother's Day. So today is also Mother's Day. So we're doing a program for mothers. If every day is Mother's Day, then today is also Mother's Day. There's nothing wrong with having that program, number one. And number two, living in a country where it's predominantly not Muslim, it is important to know that sometimes when holidays are celebrated, if it's a secular holiday and it's not a holiday based in religion, there's no problem acknowledging it. The dominant opinion is that there's no problem acknowledging it. You don't have to celebrate it. You don't have to, like, as a Muslim now, believe that you must acknowledge Mother's Day or something like this. It's not a part of our religion, but it's not haram either. So to acknowledge it is fine because it's not something based in another religion. But when it comes to other holidays that are actually rooted in the religion, those type of holidays we should abstain from observing and we should abstain from celebrating. So, for example, we're not going to throw a Christmas party at the masjid. Not because we're like mean people and not because we don't love our neighbors, but it's because we don't believe in that. So sometimes when you celebrate something, it's a representation of what you believe. So if it's something rooted in a different belief, then we can't celebrate that. But if it's something which is not rooted in belief, it just has to do with where you live, then there's no problem in acknowledging that. Like, for example, well, we'll suffice with that. Inshallah, that's clear, right? Now, there's also another hadith that I wanted to share. When we read one verse, I recited one verse and shared a verse from the Quran, which again is known as Ayatul Walidain. It's a very famous verse, the verse of the parents. And it spoke about the importance of worshiping Allah alone and honoring your parents. There's also a teaching of our Prophet, a hadith of our Prophet which supports this verse. So as Muslims, we know that our primary source of learning is the Quran. And then our secondary source of learning is the hadith of our Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So when you look at the Quran, you'll see general, universal principles that are established. And then when you look at the hadith, you'll get the particulars and the details. So it's important to have both. You can't just read the Quran and think you'll understand everything. You also need to understand the teachings of our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, peace and blessings be upon him. And that's why he's so important to us, and that's why we have so much love for him. So he says a hadith that was narrated where once Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, may Allah be pleased with him, he said, Sa'altu an-Nabiyya sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, ayyul amali ahabbu ila Allah. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was one of the greatest companions and one of the most knowledgeable companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So he asked the Prophet a question, and he says, which of the deeds are most beloved to Allah? And you see the interest that they had. They had a very strong interest to learn about what it is that Allah likes from me. What is it that Allah would want from me so that they can make Allah happy? This should be the quality of a believer also. It's not always about making ourselves happy or what can I do to make myself happy and what can I do which I like. But being a Muslim has a lot to do with what can I do to make Allah happy? What can I do that Allah likes? Not just about myself. And when we put ourselves to the side sometimes, and we're not always so self-centered, you actually find that you become more happy. This is like a little trick that I'm giving to some of the youngsters here also. A lot of times, at the end of the day, we just want to be happy people. But the problem is, many people think that the way to be happy is to actually pursue everything that you like. And the trick is actually not to pursue everything that you like. Because if you always pursue everything that you like, you actually will become less happy. There's nothing wrong with liking things and pursuing things that you like and pursuing things that you have interest in. But what's more important than that is actually pursuing what Allah likes, being a selfless person, trying to figure out what my sister would like. What does my brother like? What would my mother or my father like from me? And then trying to be a person who does kind things for others. There's a lot of gratification in this, and there's a lot of happiness that comes through that. So this companion, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, just like everyone else, wanted to be a happy person. And he understood that being happy is in learning what Allah likes. So he went to the Prophet ﷺ, and he asked him, which of the deeds are most beloved to Allah, so that I can do them? So then the Prophet, peace and blessing be upon him, he responded by saying, as-salatu ala waqtiha. He said, praying on time. He said, praying on time. So praying on time is something very important. It's something that we should all make a habit of doing. Praying on time doesn't also necessarily mean that you have to pray right when it enters. Sometimes we have a misconception. One of the opinions is that yes, you pray right when it enters. But it's okay to pray as long as you're praying within the time itself. This is what it means to pray on time. And sometimes if you can actually pray where you can have more people praying together, it's even better to delay it. And I think I've mentioned this and shared this with some of the community members here before. To give you an example, let's say today is Sunday. Maybe your dad had to go to the grocery store and he didn't get home until 2:45. He didn't get home until 2:45 p.m. But at around 1:30, you heard your phone going off for Dhuhr time. The app was going off, Allahu Akbar, and it's calling the adhan. It's like Dhuhr time. And you remember the hadith that one of the most beloved deeds to Allah is praying on time. So, should you pray immediately now at 1:30? And where you might end up praying by yourself. In this case, it's actually okay to wait for your dad to come home from the grocery store. Maybe he's out with your sister and your brother or something like that. But now when they get home, everyone can pray together. This is a tactic also for some of us parents. If there's times when everyone will be home, it's okay to delay the prayer within the time so that you can actually pray together. And this is an effective way to make sure, number one, that everyone's praying, and then number two, that you spend some time together as a family and you pray. So praying on time doesn't necessarily mean that you pray immediately when it enters. And one last even point about this, for some of the administrators in the masjid, let's say Dhuhr time is at, again, 1:30. Can you set the time for a little bit later? Yes, you can. So if there are people in the community who, let's say, get off work at 2 o'clock and they're like, we can make it there by 2:15. You can set it at 2:15 so more people come. Just a side note, and that goes for all the prayers, even for Fajr. A lot of times it's very pertinent for Fajr, because if it's coming in really early, it's hard for people to come. But if you delay it a little bit, maybe people can stop on the way to work and catch the prayer in the masjid. So you can actually make it a little bit later. So the first deed that's mentioned here, what is the most beloved deed to Allah? Praying on time. Now compare that to the verse that I shared. What did Allah talk about? The first thing He said was to worship Allah alone. When you look at this first deed, which Allah really likes, it's prayer. It has to do with now worshiping Allah alone. How do you worship Allah alone? The most effective way that you can show that you believe in Allah and worship Him by Himself is by making our salah. That's number one. The companion, Abdullah bin Mas'ud, then he says, then what deed is the best after that? قَالَ ثُمَّ أَيٌّ. He said, then which deed is the best after that? The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, Birrul Walidain. He said, filial piety, honoring your parents. Of all the things he could have said at this point, right? Listen carefully again. He said, what is the most beloved deed to Allah? The Prophet ﷺ said, prayer. He said, what's next after that? He didn't say fasting. He didn't say charity. He didn't say Hajj. He said honoring your parents. To show the rank that this has. That after now making sure that you fulfill your personal obligation to Allah, make sure you fulfill your personal obligation to your parents. Now, another thing which this shows, it's establishing a very important principle in our faith. All of the commands that we have, they either have something to do with a personal obligation and responsibility to Allah, or a personal obligation that we have towards other people in our life, either to the Creator or the creation. The huququllah wa huququl ibad. You have the rights of Allah upon us, and then you have the rights of the creation upon us. If you look at the most important right that Allah has upon us, it's that we worship Him alone by making our salah. So that if you're actually making sure that you fulfill that command of the prayer, the idea is typically you will be fulfilling everything else also. Because if you prioritize, that's the number one thing. And at the same time, when it comes to fulfilling the rights that other people have on us, it starts first and foremost with the rights that our parents have on us. And then if we learn how to respect and honor our parents, we will learn how to respect and honor everyone else in our life too. Right? And that's why sometimes nowadays, people who don't know how to respect their mother or their father, oftentimes don't know how to respect other people also. And how can you expect them to respect other people when they don't even respect their own mother or their own father? So we learn how to actually respect and deal with other people in a good fashion, with good manners, first and foremost with how we deal with our mother and our father. So this is now the second deed which was mentioned. The most beloved is worshiping Allah alone, and the second deed is that we honor our parents. And then this companion said, "Thumma ayyum." Then what's after that? What deed is the best after that? And the Prophet ﷺ mentions al-jihadu fi sabilillah, struggling in the way of Allah. And it should be known by all of us, obviously, that when we talk about jihad, one of the buzzwords that people like to use in the media nowadays, it's not referring necessarily to war, especially not a holy war, as it's oftentimes translated. Because first of all, there's nothing holy about war. And then number two, jihad is a broader term than just fighting. Jihad is actually to struggle. Al-jihadu fi sabilillah is to struggle for the sake of Allah and in the way of Allah, which includes the need at times to defend yourself and to defend your faith. But it also includes the day-to-day struggle that we have, that every single individual has. Because if it were limited to simply just fighting in the way of Allah, then it would be limited to a very small group of Muslims. Because in Islam, we do have a defense system. You do need to set up a system in which you can defend yourself and defend your faith. Just like our own country, the United States of America, it has a defense budget, and they spend a lot of money on it, more than education even. And no one is looking at them as like, why do you have an army? Why do you have an air force? Why do you have a navy? These are things which are actually very necessary, because life is something which is very real, and we don't live in Jannah. We don't live in a utopia. We don't live in a fantasy world. We live in a place where sometimes there's fighting and sometimes there's war. So not to go off on like a whole different tangent, this is Mother's Day after all. Struggling in the way of Allah is the third thing mentioned. And it's not limited to just fighting in a war. Now, why did I want to point this out? Is because when you look at the first two things which are mentioned, number one, worshiping Allah alone and making your prayer on time. And then number two, honoring your parents. Number three is that you struggle for the sake of Allah. It's the wisdom here is the Prophet ﷺ is actually telling us it's not always going to be easy. That if you want to do these first two things, you have to struggle. It's not always going to be easy. So sometimes it's going to be hard to make your prayer on time. Sometimes it's going to be hard to listen to what your mom is telling you to do or what your father is telling you to do. But just because it's hard, it doesn't mean that you don't have to do it. Just because something is difficult, it doesn't mean that we're not supposed to do it. Oftentimes, actually, if something is difficult, it's because it's very important. If there's something very difficult, it's usually because the reward And the benefit of you doing that is great. So if you want to get in good shape, you don't get into good shape by eating popcorn and drinking smoothies all day. You have to go to the gym, you have to exercise, you have to sweat, you have to put a lot of effort into your health, and then maybe you become physically fit. If you want to become intelligent and smart, you can't become super intelligent and smart by watching videos on TikTok all day. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry to burst your bubble and tell you that. If you want to be smart and you want to become intelligent and get good grades at school, sometimes you actually have to put your phone away and study. Studying is good for you. It's difficult. It might be hard. You might have to read the text twice in order for it to make sense. You might have to stay up late and do your homework and study for your finals. But that's because it's something which is important. So the Prophet ﷺ, look how beautiful he explains this to us. He says, number one, worship Allah alone, right? Which is mentioned in the Quran, but praying on time, number one. Honoring your parents, number two. And then struggling, which is number three, because you can't do number one and number two without number three. You're going to have to struggle. We're going to have to struggle in order for us to fulfill those deeds. But if we are able to fulfill those deeds, then it will be worth our while, inshallah ta'ala. Now, specifically, when it comes to our mother, there's a very famous hadith that I think we've all heard. There's another tradition where the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was asked, Man abar, who should I honor? So the Prophet ﷺ told him, Ummak, your mother. Then the companion asked, Thumma man, then who after that? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Ummak, your mother. And then he asked him a third time, Thumma man? Qala ummak, thumma abak, thumma al-amthal fal-amthal. So three times in a row, he said, your mother. Second time, your mother. Third time, your mother. Fourth time, finally said, then your father. What does that mean? That our mothers are three times more important than our father, right? Not necessarily. But what it is telling us is the importance of honoring our mother. Number one, some of the commentaries of the hadith, they give a very beautiful explanation of this. One of the reasons and wisdoms behind why the Prophet ﷺ mentions the mother three times is because of the mother having to bear that child in their womb, for carrying you in their womb. We will never, as men, as boys, we will never understand what it meant for our mother to carry us in their womb, and the type of physical struggle they had to go through, and the changes their body went through just to make sure you would develop in their womb. So because you were carried in their womb, that's one time. And then she is the one who gave birth to you too. The pains of labor, the labor pains. So in lieu of the labor pains that she had to go through for us to be born, he said, your mother. And then a third time, because after you're born, guess who feeds you? Your mother nursed you also and had to take care of you for the most part as the primary caretaker. So for those carrying you in her womb, giving birth to you, and then nursing you or taking care of you, three times the Prophet said your mother, and then your father. Father was just there for, mashallah, moral support. However, I also want to give a little bit of clarification, because I'm half joking, but I'm half serious too, right? The mother really did go through a lot for us to be born. And it also refers to serving and helping your mother. The truth of the matter is, those of us who are fathers here, those of us who will be fathers one day, like Muslim is going to get married one day to a very pious, righteous wife, inshallah, and have children of his own. As fathers, we're expected to carry our own weight. We still actually believe in gender roles as Muslims. Just so you all know, it's very important that we know this. We don't believe as Muslims that men and women are the same. Men and women are equal in the eyes of Allah, but they're different. So we do still believe in gender roles. That as a father, you're expected to do certain things as a man, and as a mother, you're expected to do certain things as a woman. Because we're not the same, we're different. And typically, as men, we are expected to be able to sometimes carry our own weight and not need help from people. That's why we have to learn how to take care of ourselves. So now, if you need help with something, you're cleaning the house, and your mother and your father is doing something in the house, and your mother's doing something in the house. Who should you go help? Go help your mom. We'll be okay. The fathers will be okay. Unless it's something where we absolutely need some assistance, you should always give preference to helping your mom with things. This is one of the meanings here. That when it comes to khidmah and service and helping, you always give preference to the mother. I will also point out, however, that this doesn't mean that because the Prophet ﷺ said your mother 3 times, that you always listen to your mother and you don't have to listen to your father. That's not what it means either. Right? In Islam, when it comes to final decisions, the father is actually given that right. So it shouldn't be as mothers and fathers, and usually, inshallah, it's not, that the mother and the father are saying 2 different things. But if your mother told you something and your father told you something else, guess who you have to listen to? Your father. Your father. Listen carefully, youngsters, please. And sisters also, so that I don't get yelled at afterwards. This is by rule. There's obviously certain circumstances. It shouldn't be that you're trying to undermine each other, using one against the other. This is obviously like immoral and unethical. We don't do that. But when it comes to, like, let's say your mother told you something and your father told you something, and maybe they weren't aware that one told you something and another one told you something else, and now you're not sure what you're supposed to do. When it comes to decision making, you're supposed to listen to your father first. This is the rule. There may be different circumstances where your father will tell you, look, listen to your mom. Maybe I didn't know that's what she said. So listen to your mom. Even if, if I tell you to do something and your mom told you to do something else, then listen to your mom. Then you can listen to your mom. But it's because your father said to listen to your mom. But otherwise, the rule is, when it comes to decisions, we do have to listen to our fathers. So I also want to just put that out there. But when it comes to serving, helping, showing love, triple times to your mom. Hug your mom, kiss your mom, do chores for your mom, 3 times as much. Even if you're not doing it as much as for your father. Show love to your father too. But even if you don't show as much love to us, we'll be okay. We know you love us, mashallah. I was told also to speak until about 7:15 and try to engage those people who are here. So is there anyone who'd like to ask a question specifically about the idea and the concept of mothers and fathers, parents, and children, and these type of things? And even more specifically about something which I mentioned during the talk. Yes. What is your name? Yes, you absolutely have to tell. What is your name? Anas. Fadl Anas. It's a good question. Very deep question. MashaAllah. So what if your dad is a non-Muslim and your mother is a Muslim? Do you still have to listen to your dad? So everything that I said about honoring and respecting your parents, this applies to your parents whether they're Muslim or non-Muslim. You always have to honor your parents. However, when it comes to now something, if a parent is not a Muslim and they tell us to do something which goes against our faith, then in those cases, we're not supposed to listen to them. So if a person happens to have a non-Muslim parent and they're telling him, go and, order a bacon sandwich and have a bacon sandwich for lunch, in those cases, we would actually say, no, thank you. I actually can't eat that. So when it comes to the mother and the father, however, obviously, like, this dynamic would be kind of unique. Are they separated? Are they together? So I can't give a blanket statement, but if there's no problem with your values as a Muslim, and you happen to be living both with your mother and your father, but the father happens to be a non-Muslim, then even in those cases, you're supposed to listen to your father. Another question? I saw a couple of hands. Amar, you have a question? The third best deed that I mentioned, al-jihad fi sabilillah, is that the same thing as fitna? It's a different thing as fitna, right? So it's not the type of test or struggle which is fitna. Fitna is like a test that causes us to struggle sometimes. But jihad is the struggle that we exert in order to overcome tests and to overcome fitna and trials and tribulations. So the exerting ourselves, and let me just add on that too, because it's a good point. Sometimes, very important principle we have to learn about our faith. Everybody here, some of the youngsters too. And even for our parents who sometimes we want to make things easy for our kids. There's nothing wrong with religion being a little difficult sometimes. There's nothing wrong with religion being a little bit difficult sometimes. It actually is going to be difficult sometimes. And we're going to have to struggle in order to fulfill it. No one here feels like, well, school is too hard, so don't let them do their homework. It's too much. We are so on top of them to make sure they do their homework, to do their schoolwork, to make sure they're at school on time. All of those things aren't hard, aren't easy. Sometimes it's difficult to get your children on school at time, going through traffic, waking up early. We go through so much, even if it's difficult. Our religion and our faith, in order to practice it, sometimes will be difficult. Allow ourselves to make some effort. And this struggle for the sake of Allah, this jihad fi sabilillah that we go through every day, will be one of the most beloved actions in the eyes of Allah. Any other questions? Yes.
Okay, the QR code, that's it. And read it.
That's mashallah. The question is regarding some of the tips, perhaps, to try to teach our children to respect their parents, because kids don't normally get these values. They don't learn these things in our society growing up here of how to respect your parents and be respectful of your parents because of a consciousness and fear of Allah, which is really the motivating factor of everything. So what are some tips for the parents to try to instill that into our children? So it starts from a very young age. And for that first few years in the developmental years, we have to be involved in their life. And we have to spend time with them. We have to show them a lot of love. I think the first thing that we do is if we can try to establish the love for our children so they know that we actually care about them, then it'll be easier for them to show that respect towards us. We have to show the importance of faith when it comes to religion. We can't expect them one day when they're 15 or 16 or 17 to start doing what they're supposed to because now they're old. And then they get surprised. It has to start from a young age. It's a very loaded question in the sense it's hard to put that, to answer it in this type of a setting. But the short answer, dear brother, would be that showing them love from a very young age and showing them the importance of our faith from a very young age will hopefully instill that respect for Allah first and foremost, and for our deen, and then for their parents also.
Somebody posted one question through the QR code. You guys can scan this QR code and then post a question. It says that there is a text box that says your answer, but just type in your question there, okay? One question came through that. I'm going to read it to you. If I want to do something that is sunnah, but my parent thinks it is unnecessary, what should I do? Obey my parents or do the sunnah?
So the question here, if it's a single act, let's say, for example, I'm about to go pray I just was feeling extra motivated, mashallah, and I wanted to pray nawafil, some sunnah prayers, extra prayers. And then I hear my mom start calling me, or my father's calling me, or they say, I need you to help you right now. At that point, you don't say, well, I'm actually about to pray, I want to do my sunnah. So I'm not going to listen to them right now because prayer is more important. It's obligatory, it's mandatory to help and honor your parents. It's sunnah to do those extra prayers. Now, so just to explain to everyone here, I think the reason why they mentioned the sunnah is not something obligatory, because obviously it's clear if it's something obligatory, like you have to pray and they're saying don't pray. Of course we have to pray. But what if something is sunnah, meaning it's good to do, but it's not obligatory? So in that moment, you actually leave the act of sunnah, something which is not obligatory, so that you can help your parents, which is obligatory, and honor their request. Now, if you can say, is it okay if I pray first and I can help you in 5 minutes? You can say that. But what if they said, no, I need you now. Come down here right now. Then you go and you help them right now, and you'll still get the reward for that extra sunnah prayer. Now, there is a secondary part of this, and maybe it's what's intended from the question. There are certain established acts of sunnah that we are supposed to inculcate into our life, that we're supposed to practice in our life. It's not just like a one-time thing. If our parents are telling us for whatever reason not to do that, then we have to try to work out a way where we're able to still adopt that sunnah into our life without being disrespectful to our parents. That can be challenging. It may require some kind of tactful thinking, but we do have to find out a way to do that. For example, inshallah, it's not the case here, but just as an example, if someone's parents told them that I never want you to go to the masjid, you can't go at all. Fine, I'll let you go for Jummah because it's obligatory, but besides that, you can never go to the masjid. You have to stay home. Then this is something where it's a sunnah to go to the masjid, at least sometimes. You're not asking to go for every prayer. You're not asking to spend 8 hours a day there, but never to go. It's a sunnah to have some attachment to the masjid. Then in those cases, we have to still try to manage and find out a way that we can adopt that sunnah into our life. It's jihad also, yes. It is a jihad, no doubt. It's a struggle. Any other questions?
Yeah, you guys can scan this code and then post your question. Nobody knows who's asking that question, so feel free. Anonymous. Yeah, while you ask, maybe they will use that. So when you go ahead.
You have a question and answer to his question.
Of course. Yes.
So you're talking about the fact to be a role model. Okay. If we are the store if we are not going to do that, we are not going to do it. We are not training more. And we play for oh, you are not playing. You're not getting over. You are very lucky. You have to go back to the how you are behaving to your life. Kids will are going to be like or in case you don't have yourself, you never, you only your feeling, how you will behave, the kids will behave. So this is very important for all of us to become the role. Otherwise, like even in United States, although history, share. Now we see the real. Each room has a parents, each under one wall. You cannot see it. That's why they have the table, you have each their own table, room, everything. So we have to ask the kids for.
Yeah. Couple of questions came in.
Yeah. So one question, this is from the girl, it says, in Desi culture, it tends to be a taboo to say, in quotes, I love you, Amma, or I love you, Abu. Outside doing chores and helping our parents with their tasks, what's the best way for us to verbally tell our parents we love them? This is again from girls.
It's a great question, mashallah, right? So the verse of the parents that I recited at the very beginning, the verse actually continues, right? And it says that وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ مِنَ الرَّحْمَةِ وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Right? And before that, وَقُلْ لَهُمَا قَوْلًا كَرِيمًا. Say kind words to them. This is a very important way to express kindness to our parents. One easy answer to this might be that if it's taboo not to tell them I love you, I know it can feel awkward. Growing up, even myself, I never said this really to my mother and my father. But it's something that I learned how to do after I became a Muslim. So now whenever I speak to my mother and my father, I never hang up the phone except I tell them that I love them. And it was something I was never trained to do. But try to develop that into your habit. It's actually, it may feel awkward. It may feel awkward if you do it, but it's something where once the awkwardness goes away, then it becomes easier to do. It should be something that we should get used to saying kind things to our parents. So that's number one. What else can you do besides telling them to verbally tell them? Now, if it's still very, very difficult to tell them explicitly, I love you, Amma, or I love you, Abu, then at least say kind words to them. Never say something which will be hurtful to them or disrespectful to them. It doesn't mean that you always have to agree and listen to them and just remain silent either. This is an important point to all the youngsters here. Respecting your parents doesn't mean you always have to agree with them and just remain silent and say, okay, mom, okay, dad. If you actually want to if you actually disagree with what they're saying, or you need to do something else, you're allowed to say, is it actually, this is not, I think it's supposed to be this way. Or is it actually, it might be better if we do this first and then do that later. There's nothing wrong with saying that, but it's how we say it. Say it with respect. Because while we are allowed to sometimes disagree with our parents, we're never allowed to be disrespectful. So we can at least say these words of kindness, like I love you, mom or dad or abu or ammu, ummu, ummi. Then we should at least say kind words, verbally express kind words to them at all times, inshallah.
So in America, it is very, very. I love you, so this, when you say to them, not just for the things how you will do, and then you come in, you just put your fist, so if there's something.
I wanted to say before I forget and before we end up running out of time or something, there's another important thing that we should all do to express kindness to our parents. To express kindness to our parents. We should always make dua and pray for our parents. We should always pray for our parents. Our parents aren't perfect also. So sometimes they may say something or do something that is inappropriate. That's actually could happen. They could say something or do something that's hurtful to us. You should always pray for your parents, pray for their forgiveness, pray for their mercy, pray that Allah always helps them in everything they want to do. Because at the end of the day, their well-being, even though they may make mistakes, they want what's best for you at the end of the day. Even though they make mistakes and are not perfect, they always want what's best for you. So you should pray for them. So in the verse of the parents, it actually says, say kind words, be humble to them. وَقُلْ رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. And oh Allah, be merciful on them as they were merciful to me when I was a baby. When I was incapable of taking care of myself. I couldn't even change my own diaper. We used to urinate on ourselves. How helpless were we? It was our parents who took care of us. And we didn't have a credit card. We couldn't walk the giant eagle. It was our parents who put food in our mouth, mashallah. So we should always now pray for their mercy. Oh Allah, have mercy on them. And even in the Arabic dua, everyone should know this dua. Try to learn it even in the Arabic language. And in the same way that you pray 5 times a day, you should make dua for them 5 times a day. So in this verse of the parents, Allah talked about, or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he said, pray and be good to your parents. How often do we pray every day? Minimum 5 times. So how often should we make dua for our parents? 5 times. So after every prayer, you should include this as a habit. رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. And maybe one of the community members here, Sister Fatima, maybe can print out this dua and make it something here at the masjid that every child will come and learn how to make. And after every prayer, when your duas are very powerful, everybody should make this dua for their parents, because this is also how we will continue to honor our parents even after they pass away. One day they won't be around anymore, you can still honor them and be kind to them by praying for them. Every single day, minimum, at least 5 times a day.
That's another question. Is it true that parents are not supposed to use violence?
Is it true that parents are not supposed to use violence? So this concept of spanking, mashallah. So the spanking that is sometimes used for our children, it should be such that it doesn't leave a mark. Parents are allowed to use some physical form of discipline if necessary, but it should not be excessive. Our children are a trust. Our children are a trust to us that we have to fulfill that trust. They're in our care. So sometimes you might give a little nudge to their ear, a little tug on their ear. Sometimes you might give a little push to their chin or their mouth for saying something inappropriate. These are sometimes necessary acts of physical contact to let them know that was inappropriate. But even that should be done. Even that should be done. What's the word? Selectively. Not every single time. Because then at some point it loses its value or it loses its impact and its effect. But there shouldn't be this concept of physical abuse. These things are prohibited in our faith. We're not allowed to physically abuse our children as they are in our care. The Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, it said about him that he never raised his hand to a child. It doesn't mean that it wasn't allowed to, but this is actually what is optimal, is that you don't. But if a person were to, then it should be in a manner which is not going to leave any type of a mark, and something which will be extremely injure the child to that degree.
Another question. As a mother in America, how can I explain for my kids that something that is normalized here or wrong without making them think I am strict?
We're actually getting some good questions today, mashallah. A little bit challenging to answer. They're hard because it's like a Q&A is these are things that we have to actually try to sit down and learn. It's Q&A sometimes feels like a drive-through way of learning our deen. So when you go to the drive-through, you're not always going to get good quality food. If you want good quality food, you have to buy the ingredients yourself and get the best ingredients and go home and mashallah, spice it up how you like it and cook it properly. And learning is like this. So alhamdulillah, there's nothing wrong with this. We should have these type of sessions, but we should also do our best to continue these sessions of learning and be attached with learning our faith, inshallah. So the question is, how do we explain to our children that something is normal, that when something is normalized here, that it's wrong without making them think that we're strict? To me, again, it starts with instilling that from a very young age. When children are young, they're very impressionable. We have to be willing to tell them from a very young age. We can't always feel embarrassed of our faith, or we can't feel like, well, I don't want them to get like singled out or like, feel unaccepted if we tell them not to do this because the other kids may say something to them. It gets more difficult when they're older to start telling them, well, actually, we can't do X, Y, and Z. We start from a very young age as much as possible. And as our dear brother Zaidi Bhai said, through our actions is first and foremost. So if we are ourselves acting on the things that we want them to do, it becomes a little bit easier to have the authority to tell them not to do it. And then you also identify things which are obviously wrong. We try to identify things that are very obviously wrong and use those as examples to show, look, this is normalized too. Should we do that also? And you try to, of course, identify things which they would actually agree with you. Yeah, we probably shouldn't do that. We probably shouldn't do that. Whether it's drinking alcohol, it's quite normal nowadays, to go to a party, in a high school party, and there'll be high school students drinking alcohol. It's quite normal. It's quite normal to see even 5th and 6th graders having boyfriends and girlfriends. That doesn't make it okay. So we try to identify some of these things which may have become normalized and show them that this is actually not okay in our values.
I think one more question is two more actually. Yeah, this is two more questions and then probably we'll be done. So another one. But anything about religion and they think you are strict, even if done since a young age. I think this is a follow-up question to the previous one.
So even, let's say, they still feel like it's strict even if they've done it from a young age. Well, this is where I would also encourage the importance of explaining the wisdom of the religion. So it shouldn't always just be this is haram. Our focus when it comes to faith shouldn't just be on haram. Because if you think about it, there aren't very many things which are haram. Like we try to like, what's so strict? What's so hard about being Muslim? Can you eat pork? You can't, again, we have a kind of a mixed crowd here, so we can't do certain things. Those things which we can't do are actually good for us, right? They're actually good for us. So our focus should not be only on things which are haram. When it comes to Islam and like making Islam like something in making our deen in Islam a discussion, every time we're talking about Islam, it shouldn't simply be about what we can't do. Make sure we're taking time also to show the beautiful things of our faith, learning things about our faith together as a family, doing things together that are alternative things so that they don't feel like they're missing out on something. So if they can't go to, I don't know, a house, some type of a particular get-together or gathering where it's going to be immoral actions taking place, don't just make them stay home. Don't allow the alternative to simply be now you just have to stay home. Take them somewhere. Do something with them so they don't feel like they're missing out. This is another alternative, Allah knows best.
This is the last question. I think Vedha is the last one she's going to ask you. So Another one came in here is, do you think today's parents are abused by their children? How do we make our children realize that their disobedience is hurtful to us?
How do we make our children realize that this disobedience is hurtful to us? Again, as parents, we're typically expected to deal with things. I don't know that we're the type that has to like guilt our children into doing things because you're hurting my feelings type of thing. Sometimes there just has to be, and it depends what the age of the child is, but sometimes we have to be the adult in the room. So if we tell them not to do something and they throw a fit or a tantrum about it, then we have to just allow them to throw their tantrum or throw their fit. I don't know that we have to express to them, look, you're upsetting me. Now, if they're getting older and they're still doing that, then sometimes sitting them down after not during the heat of the moment, after cooler heads have prevailed, when you actually are not butting heads, sitting down with them and saying, you know what happened the other day when I had asked you to do this, those things actually hurt my feelings. It may also be the mother speaking if there was something done to the father, say, you know, your father that really bothered him. It may be the father speaking to the kids and letting them know later, you know what happened the other day, what you said to your mother really bothered her. She loves you so much, and anytime you show any type of dissatisfaction towards her, it breaks her heart. You can let them know, because sometimes even the children don't realize what they're doing. You know, like as a child when you were growing up, you guys were her whole life, and you used to adore her, and you never did anything that would show any type of like displeasure towards them. So now, when you show that kind of act of disrespect or that confrontation towards them, do you know it actually breaks their heart? And you try to explain these things to them, not in the heat of the moment, but outside of that moment. And perhaps, again, if they're older and they're teenagers, maybe in those moments they'll realize and hopefully try to improve their behavior, inshallah.
Take the mic.
Oh, I see. So continuing some type of a conversation about what? About general, got it.
But also going more into, a lot in schools, there's policy students at young elementary school, where then there's figuring out who you are, and figure out who you can trust. But I think that's really important, that it's introduced, to everyone in the group and how they're figuring out that conversation with their own children, and otherwise the children can be into that conversation. And now we have to
Right. So basically, again, trying to continue these type of discussions when we can give it a little bit more attention. We do have a few programs that are taking place for high school age students and middle school age students as well. So see, inshallah, Sister Fatima about that. So I come every Sunday morning and we have an age range of students from, I would say, somewhere between 10 and 14. And it's a very important age when they're getting exposure to these different type of discussions. And we have some good conversations, and you'll be surprised, some of your own children who come to that class, they are very engaged and they ask very intelligent questions and things that we might not even realize they're thinking about. And then we also have a monthly, at this point, we had a monthly program for high school students. So, we'll try to increase those discussions, but when they take place, it's important that we take advantage of them also. Because again, the point was that we try to have these conversations regularly, and also, as the sister mentioned, addressing issues about like gender, whether it's the equality of men and women being equal, which we do believe, where they're just different. So sometimes they twist these things into making us seem like we are misogynistic and we're like old-fashioned and patriarchal. We have to have these conversations for sure, Sean.
Actually, one of my democratic focus on this topic was well received in the community.
So I think my experience is like that these topics are always brought up in I understand this is middle school, high school, we probably perfect for and even our younger.
So, very interesting. Very interesting question which I was going to ask here. Well, in that direction, it was a part of the question. We are in this society where one of the kids very good question is mom father has been or vice versa, and many things we get from this country. Now, when you were talking about the mom and the children, very time that first one, second, third time, but at the same time, there are moms, even if they are not ideal. Some of them, they drink alcohol. Some of them are in drugs. And some of them are fighting on the equal, like women are equal. So in that connection, how the kids should behave to those moms, and how we should relate to those. In pregnancy, they're being after that, they are not going to be born. So,
Yeah. Go ahead. One last thing I'd also add very briefly, inshallah. At some point, something which is very important is that as parents, all of us need to be able to engage our own children about their faith and these difficult conversations. This is something very important for parents. As parents, if we don't know how to explain something to them, we should try to learn that too. So the education is not just for the children, it's also for the parents. Our Prophet ﷺ was commanded, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Say, O Muhammad ﷺ, say, O my Lord, increase my knowledge. He was أَعْلَمُ الْخَلْقِ, the most knowledgeable of all creation, but he was commanded by Allah to ask for more knowledge. So learning is something that we value, as it's a part of our identity from the cradle to the grave. So the adults in our community also need to seek out the avenues of learning that we can be involved with so that we further our own understanding. We all know this from our own professions, that you always have to constantly stay informed, whether it's through seminars and whether it's through different trainings, in order to make sure that we stay up to speed with our own profession. We also, as parents, one of the most important things, we can't rely on the sheikh or the imam to explain Islam to our kids. Every single one of us as parents, and this is my final, I guess, advice for myself and for all of us. should engage our children with what they are learning at school and what their thoughts are about certain things and see what they have to say about it. And then we have to be capable of explaining our position as Muslims to them effectively. And if they ask us something or we find ourselves getting stumped with how to answer it, we should learn how to answer it and then go back to them and explain it. Your explaining it to them will have much more of an impact and effect than anyone else explaining it to them.
Just somebody added, it's not a question. I just read this out. I just wanted to add that there aren't many haram things. It's the society that does many haram things, so it feels like there are many, but really there isn't. So
Yeah, that's a good point. That is a good point. So there aren't very many haram things, but those few haram things are so prevalent in our society, it feels like it's a lot. So we definitely need to try to be better about providing alternatives for our children so they don't feel like they're missing out on something. Don't just say it's haram, don't do that. Like take them out and get them involved with other things that are not haram.
I think you have any? Yeah. I think now the next program is going to be Kahoot, but before that, I would like to thank Sheikh Musa and Mr. Fatima. We will end with this dua, inshallah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah.
Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah, you guys, we're going to make a dua. All the youngsters, listen up, please. All the youngsters, listen up, please. All the girls too, please listen up. We're going to make a dua now, inshallah. As I'm making dua, I would like everyone to say Ameen. This is the etiquette of making dua. When someone prays and supplicates and make dua, if you say Ameen, then the angels, listen carefully, the angels will say Ameen and also for you too. So when you say Ameen, the angels will become involved with you and they'll engage with you. So listen carefully with all your heart. Even if you don't understand it because it might be in Arabic, just say Ameen to the dua and the angels will also say Ameen for you too. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad. Salatan tunajjina biha min jami' al-ahwali wal-afat. وتقضي لنا جميع الحاجات وتطهرنا بها من جميع السيئات وترفعنا بها عندك أعلى الدرجات وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا رب ارحمهما كما ربياني صغيرا ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. Oh Allah, we ask that you bless and protect and send your mercy always on our mothers and on our fathers, on our grandparents, our grandmothers, and our grandfathers. Oh Allah, we pray that you show mercy on them as they showed mercy to us as young children. Oh Allah, we pray that you bless and protect our families and our children, our sons and our daughters, our nieces and our nephews, our grandchildren, grandsons and granddaughters, all of our friends and loved ones with faith, O Allah. We pray that you protect their faith always until the day that they meet you in a state that you are pleased with them, O Allah. O Allah, those of us who have family here who are not people of faith, who do not have awareness of your oneness, who do not know who Sayyidina Muhammad is, guide them so that they can say this shahada, guide them so that they can express the belief in your oneness and belief in the messengership of your beloved Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Oh Allah, guide our families, our communities, our children, our parents, our aunts and our uncles, our cousins and our friends and our loved ones, and allow us to have a good seal. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyil ummi wa baraka wa sallam bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin. Ameen ya rabbil alameen.
Yeah, I think all the kids are waiting for the next program, that is Kahoot. So we are going to start inshallah. And thank you, Sheikh Musa, for very good lecture. You can sit down, sister.
Yeah.
You can sit down.
So inshallah.
Sit down.
But first, I want to tell you, so you have to take care of your daughters. They are the future moms. You have to take care of your sisters and the husband to take care of your wives, because happy wife